Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. The real estate markets move in cycles, and depending on where they are and where you are, you're going to make different decisions. Today, we're going to talk about how you can prepare to thrive in the next downturn on the Real Estate Guys radio program.
If you love real estate and have always wanted to own your own business, listen up. The Real Estate Guys and their panel of experts want to teach you how to go full-time fast in the real estate syndication business. These next few years may go down in history as one of the best times ever to acquire investment real estate. There are deals everywhere if you know where to look and how to assemble the resources. The Secrets of Successful Syndication seminar will show you how to make big money doing big deals from a team of experts that have syndicated projects totaling more than $1 billion. Don't wait for someone to give you a raise or create a job for you. Attend the Secrets of Successful Syndication and learn how to build a team, raise capital, find deals, and make full-time money in 6 months or less. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click on events. All the big players use syndication as a way to diversify risk, optimize profits, and earn big money. You can too. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click on events.
Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio show. I'm your host, Robert Helms. With me, as usual, co-host, financial strategist Russell Gray.
Hey, Robert.
You know, we've had a couple of killer weeks, right? Robert Kiyosaki and then Ken McElroy, and a lot of folks are really interested in some things Kenny said, like we're at the top of the market, we're not buying anymore. Things Robert said, like, oh my gosh, there's another crash coming. I wrote about it, and I still believe it. So are we at the top of the market? And if so, what does that mean? We thought today we talk about a couple of things. What market cycles are, so you kind of have an understanding of that. And it's up to you to figure out where we are in the cycle. But then how can we manage our psychology as we go through these interesting times?
Yeah, and I think the best way you do that is you talk to people that have actually gone through it before and the lessons that they've learned and what they've done. But I think the bigger picture here is when we sit down to interview these guys, we don't really have an agenda. It's not like we script out, oh, let's talk about market cycles for the next 2 or 3 weeks. We just talk to them what's on their mind. And when we start to hear what's on their mind, we begin to see a pattern. It makes you go, well, wait a minute, we're talking to some pretty smart folks, and people are beginning to see things the same way. And now you got to begin to take that a little bit seriously. So it does make a lot of sense to think about in preparing is acknowledging the fact that markets do go in cycles, and there's cycles within cycles. You've got economic cycles, you've got financial cycles, you've got sentiment cycles, you've got political cycles, you got lunar cycles, you got
motorcycles.
You got motorcycles. You got all kinds of cycles going on, and some of them are in sync, but most of them not. So it's this weather pattern, these ocean currents, if you will, as you're sailing in your investment vehicle and it's floating on top of the ocean. It's floating on top of an economic ocean, but it's also being affected by the faster, more rapid winds of change. So the metaphor, I think, really fits. So the question is now, how do you prepare? And then it's not just how do you prepare your financials and your balance sheet, but really, how do you prepare yourself psychologically? Because if you lose your cool in a crisis, and you know who you are, right? If you're the type of person out there that is the kind that just loses your cool in a crisis, Blair Singer says when emotions run high, intelligence runs low. And it's very difficult to make sound business decisions, rational decisions, when your heart is beating like a hummingbird and you're sweating profusely. So keeping your cool and knowing that what you're going through is happened to other people before. And I think that is a very calming thing. It's like, okay, this has happened before. Other people have been where I'm at before. Somebody has navigated this before. How can I find them and how can I learn and how can I apply that to my life so that I can mitigate the bad and recover quickly from what I actually do suffer?
So let's talk about market cycles and how they work. Before we talk about market cycles, let's talk about something called the stages of a market. So these are two different things. A market, think of a real estate market, maybe an area that you invest in. They tend to go through stages. And the first stage, and again, it's hard to do on the radio, but imagine that we're at the bottom of a chart and it's starting to go up. That's the area of growth. And so that can be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years when a market is growing. Then it reaches stage stage 2, which is called equilibrium. Now things are pretty much status quo. Most of the developable land has been developed. Most of the buildings are built. People are living in houses. People are going to work in buildings. Then what happens invariably in markets is a period where we start to see a decline. And in decline, you see the changes of use. You see the boarded up buildings. You see some of the things Ken talked about in retail last week, and just all of the changes that happen in a market as the new area of favor changes. And the fourth stage of a market is once that works itself out, and again, that can be years, then we get to revitalization. Gentrification. When are we re-upping a market? The old downtown that used to be the center and then nobody ever went there and now it's vibrant again. That's revitalization. So those are the stages a real estate market goes through. Now we overlap that with what we call the real estate cycles. And a cycle is a sequence of events that repeats. So markets go up and down. The wave analogy or the roller coaster analogy. And so picture a sine wave, if you will, right? That's kind of the traditional look of a cycle. An actual real estate cycle never looks like that. It doesn't go down for 6 months, back up for 6 months, back over the top. But picture this sine wave, and you've got that line in the middle that we call our balanced value line. So the start of the cycle, you can start anywhere, but let's say we start in a recessionary period. And what happens is that sales go down, occupancy often goes down, prices go down, so the volume of real estate changing hands as well as the prices go down. This is what happened in 2008. And the variety of reasons that trigger cycles is a whole nother conversation, but just understanding from a technical analysis, if you will, where the cycle is, everyone's running for the exit. People are selling, as we talked about last week with Kenny, when everybody else was selling and running for the exits, he and Ross were buying. And they were the only guys at the table many, many times. And so that goes on until you hit this bottom. The market finds a bottom. I remember when Las Vegas had done incredibly well and all the high rises were being built and all that. And then the bottom fell out of the market and all of a sudden you couldn't give those properties away. But at some point you can. When the price reaches the point where those folks on the sideline have capital and those big institutions start to step in, then we start to see recovery. So phase 1, recession on the downward trip, still below the balance line. Phase 2 is back into recovery. Notice I'm not calling them stages, but phases, like a sine wave. So in phase 2, you have this recovery period where your volume of sales is increasing. Your price may not be yet. Your occupancies are starting to increase, but maybe the rent isn't yet. And little by little, those things start to work themselves out. Now we get to that balance point and we start to get to expansion. And expansion is where we've been in a lot of markets for the last several years. And that is when capital's available, it's inexpensive, projects need to be done, there is demand for the property, there's demand on the tenant side, there's demand on the owner side, there's new housing starts, all of that's working together. And we see rents are going up, occupancy's going up, everything's roses. Then we hit that peak, and now in the last phase, we have our contraction, and it contracts down, and we start to head towards, again, recession. Now, in contraction, things are still pretty good. Rents are high. Occupancy may be pretty good, but starting to waver. So this is when we look for the signs in contraction that the next recession is coming. Now, that's the academic version. That's like the nice and neat, your college professor puts that up on the board. Right? I know this because I was that college professor putting it up on the board. And then I tempered that, if you will, textbook example, which of course we were supposed to teach with, here's how it works in the real world. The markets are independent and dependent. The markets are interlinked and not.
Right. We
We have the different markets that you talked about, the different cycles within a market, and it gets confusing. Don't let this worry you. It's no big deal. You're usually just in a product type, a market or two. You just have to learn how to read these signs.
Well, there's a lot of sloshing going on as these different things are hitting against each other. So think of it this, because, this is all very abstract. This is all theoretical. And in the reality, and I think a big part of what we're going to end up talking about today is the human factor. So you've got these market waves going on that are made up of a bunch of individual actors, individual people. So imagine a big flock of birds. Have you ever seen a big flock of birds kind of swarm? They all kind of move in a direction, then they move back in a direction.
Together. Yeah.
Together. But individually, you can imagine if a bird is late to the party and they don't make the turn and then the thing comes back on them, now there's collisions. Now they're trying to fly against the wave. They're running into other things. And this is the human factor. Now take it from being birds and imagine it being people. And somebody comes to the market and they're a little bit late. And so the market is overbought. You've got too many people, too many buyers. Prices are getting bid up and inventory gets tight and people get desperate to get in on the party and they bid up to where it doesn't make any sense. And then the market turns. Now they're stuck holding a property that now is underwater. They can't get rid of it. They maybe don't have the cash flows to retain it long term, and they get wiped out. They get knocked out of the air. They're down on the ground. They fell out, right? The wave is still going back and forth, and people are getting rich. But every once in a while, somebody who's on the wrong end of the turn gets hit and gets knocked out. And the question is if you get completely knocked out and you're dead, well, it's over. But if you get knocked out and you can get back up again, you can get back in the game. And this is managing the cycles of the psychology because, it's a funny thing. You talk about Tom Hopkins taught us this, the 4 levels of competency. The first level of competency is you're incompetent and you don't know it. So it's like, I'm going to learn real estate. I'm going to be rich in real estate. Man, it's great. Look at all this, right? And you're incompetent. You don't even know it. You go out there and you start running around. You get whacked, right? You got on the wrong end of a wave. Something was always boom, you got hit. All right, now you have this wake-up call. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm incompetent. But now I know that I'm incompetent.
That's level 2.
That's level 2, conscious incompetence. You're actually smarter than when you were unconsciously incompetent because at least now you have a problem and you're aware of it. You can't solve a problem you're not aware of, but you do have a problem. If you will force yourself to get around the right people and study the right things and begin to take action and make the right moves, you will
get the lessons.
Get the lessons. You will eventually become competent with a lot of conscious effort. You have to think about it. You got to work at it. You got to plan. You got to just outwork everybody. And it's that stage, it's like, God, is this even worth it? It's so much work. If you will stick with it, you'll get to that 4th level, which is where you're unconsciously competent, which means now you're flowing. You don't have to think about it. When you watch those birds fly, they just move. It's fluid. Nobody's thinking. Nobody's planning. They're just flowing. And if you're on the right end of it, it's a beautiful thing. If you watch a surfer riding a wave who knows what he's doing, it's a beautiful thing. Somebody going down a ski slope. Think of all the different analogies, right? When you have that high level of competence, you are so fluid and experts make it look easy. But you have to go through the first 3 phases to get to level 4.
Last week, we talked about peak portfolio management, the idea of when your portfolio is at the high end of the cycle, what are the ways you can start doing? Today, we're going to talk about the other side of it. When things go bad, when you go through contraction and then recession, and those of us that went through 2008 and, oh my gosh, lost millions and millions of dollars worth of property, there were a lot of folks who gave up. They threw up their hands and said, well, I tried real estate and it didn't work. Or they lost their home and they were just embarrassed. All those things happen. And yet, if you're going to live to play another day, you've got to get through that. There will continue in your future to be great times and terrible times. You will go through recession. You will go through contraction, but you'll also go through expansion. You'll go through every one of the cycles if you stay in the game. We like to say that a bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn. And as a real estate investor, things are going to change. Our guest today went through the muck more than lots of people. He built up an amazing portfolio of more than 800 houses. I mean, he was firing on all cylinders back in the day. It's a very similar story to our story, which is, I think, why we're kindred spirits with this gentleman. We met him at one of our events. He came to the Secrets of Successful Syndication when we were in Phoenix, and our good friend Robert Kiyosaki dropped by. And in fact, Rod, who you're going to meet in a minute, has a picture on his website taken at that event with he and Robert. And he was just out there, rebuilding his portfolio and sharing his ideas. Since then, he's gone on to amass a great fortune in real estate. He's very philanthropic. He's got a podcast he started a couple years ago. So when we come back, you're going to meet Rod Khleif on the Real Estate Guys radio program.
Need help with your real estate investment portfolio? Check out the resources page at realestateguysradio.com.
All aboard! It's last call for the Real Estate Guys 15th Annual Investors Summit at Sea. We're nearly sold out, just a few cabins remaining for you to spend a week with like-minded investors, world-class educators, and real-world professionals. Returning this year are sales legend Tom Hopkins, international developer Beth Clifford, attorney Mauricio Raoul, commercial mortgage broker and syndicator Michael Becker, and the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, G. Edward Griffin. Also returning are Peter Schiff and Robert Kiyosaki. It all begins April 1st, 2017 in Houston, Texas, so hurry! Visit realestateguysradio.com and click on the tab that says Summit to learn more and reserve your spot. This transformational week is like no conference you've ever attended. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click Summit and make plans to spend a week with the Real Estate Guys, Robert Kiyosaki, and an all-star faculty on the 15th Annual Investors Summit at Sea.
Hi, this is Mauricio Raul, the founder and CEO of Mir Law Group, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program, heard every weekend on this great radio station, all the time at realestateguysradio.com. We're talking today about overcoming adversity. Things are going to go wrong as a real estate investor. Those cannot be avoided, but it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it. Our guest today has an amazing story, a successful real estate investor and entrepreneur, built up an amazing portfolio of property, and then the crash happened, and it would have been easy just to crawl under a rock and want to forget it all, but that's not what he did. So please welcome to our program the amazing Rod Khleif. How are you, sir?
Oh, thank you. I don't know about that amazing word, but that's very kind of you, and it's a real honor to be on you guys' show. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, absolutely, and your story's amazing. Tell us, first of all, how you built up a portfolio to 800 houses.
Well, I've actually owned 2,000 in a buy and hold strategy. So let me back up a little bit. So I immigrated to the country when I was 6 years old, and we ended up in Denver, Colorado. I immigrated from Holland, and we didn't have much money. I literally grew up wearing Goodwill clothes, and we had to buy day-old bread because it was cheaper then, and powdered milk because that's all we could afford. You know, I watched my mom, who had an incredible work ethic, babysit kids, and let me now segue into real estate. How I got into real estate was when I was 14. She used her babysitting money to buy the house across the street for I'm around $34,000. Don't hold me to the exact amount, but when I was 14, and then when I was 17, about to graduate from high school, it was worth about $20,000 more than that, $54,000. She told me, and I was shocked. Although I flunked basic math in high school, I was able to do that calculation that she'd make 20 grand without doing anything, and so I immediately got into real estate. And I started buying houses in Denver after a couple of years. And for your listeners, anytime somebody's willing to do something that other people aren't willing to do, they'll usually be successful. And I literally went out and knocked on doors of people that were in foreclosure. And I'd also had my broker's license. So I'd either list their house for sale or I'd offer to buy it. And I ended up buying 500 houses in Denver that I rented out. Then I went to Memphis and I bought a couple of hundred houses in Memphis, and ultimately moved to Florida and bought 1,400 houses here in Florida. But I also bought apartment buildings in each of those states. So 2006, I was focused on value. I was focused on the value of my real estate. And I thought I could do no wrong because the value of my real estate in that year alone went up $17 million.
Wow.
And of course, I did the math on that, and what it worked out to per hour on a 40-hour work week, I will tell you, was like $3,700. And I, my head got so big that I could barely get it through a door anymore. I thought I was golden. And you know how it is when God or the universe sees you being like that. Well, that was 2008, and you get a smackdown, and I got a smackdown. And because I was focused on value instead of cash flow, I had 800 houses here in Florida, and I lost them. For a lot of reasons. One, the taxes and insurance on single-family houses here are higher than in most states because we don't have a state income tax, as well as most of my properties are up and down the coast, so I had that insurance is even more expensive, and I just wasn't paying attention to cash flow. But what I noticed was, in the midst of that crash, that my multifamily properties were doing okay. They'd contracted, but they were able to weather the storm, and that's the reason that I actually started my podcast about multifamily investing, because I'm really an advocate now for, if you're going to buy and hold, don't do it the way I did. It's too much work for a whole bunch of reasons. And if you're going to hold on to property, I believe it's safer to have multifamily. So that's my story. It was pretty hard. I don't call them failures. I call them seminars, because they're all learning experiences. And I've had some spectacular successes, but I've had some huge seminars. And that in 2008 was about a $50 million seminar, and my biggest yet, and hopefully my biggest for the rest of my life. But I did learn from it, and it was very, very painful because I thought I was set for life. But I'm back now, and we can talk about the psychological things that I did to get past that and to how I got to the success that I'm blessed to enjoy today.
Yeah, well, I think, Rob, one of the big things is that it's this idea that we set out on a road, whatever the path is in investing, in your case, value. I want to own more top-line real estate. It goes up in value. That all looks really good. And in certain times, that's absolutely great. But as we know, the real estate markets move in cycles. A lot of us in 2008 were over-leveraged and all those crazy things happened. But, when you get through something like that, it does make you a better investor. So I definitely want to get to that. But before we do, take us through the psychology of that. You've got this huge portfolio. You've got a ton of equity, a ton of value in your property. You think you're set for life. And now you have to face the reality that it's just not going to be that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I literally was at a 30% loan to value. For those of you listening who don't know what that means, I owed 30 cents on every dollar, and I went upside down. That's how bad it crashed on my portfolio here in Florida. So,
wow.
It was rough. But, luckily I've spent about 16 years following Tony Robbins around, and, he's a master of turning your psychology around. And really 80% of your success in anything is your psychology. 20% is the mechanics. 80% is your mindset. It's your ability to deal with setbacks. It's your ability to focus on what's important. So, when I coach people, I make sure, number one, and this is what I did for myself, I make sure, number one, that you have clear and concise goals. That's number one. But I take it a whole lot further than that. At least I did in my own life. And I didn't for a long time realize what I was doing, but I was really visualizing and manifesting what I wanted in life. So, for example, I'll back up a little bit. When I was 18, I got my real estate broker's license, and I had this ugly Ford four-door Granada, and because that's what I thought you had to be a realtor. This four-door car was the ugliest thing you'd ever seen. The broker that I was working with let me drive his Corvette. And so I got a picture of a Corvette out of a magazine, and I put it on the sun visor of my Granada, and within a year, but after looking at that picture regularly, I had the Corvette that I wanted. Then, this will date me back then, the TV show Magnum PI was on. And by the way, let me preface this by saying this may sound like I'm bragging, and that's not at all the case, because the things I'm going to describe here I'm not even really that interested in anymore. But it's my story, so it's the best example of how I get past adversity. So Magnum PI, Tom Selleck drove this beautiful red Ferrari 308, and I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So I got a picture of that car, and I put it on the visor of my Corvette. And within a year or two, I had a Maserati that looked just like that Ferrari from the front end, and thought it was magnificent. And then I'll give you two more examples. Then the last car example was I always wanted a Lamborghini. And I had posters of them, when I was a teenager with the bikini girls and everything, like a lot of teenagers had in their room.
As you do.
As you do. And in fact, I even told my son when he was 8 or 10 years old that I always wanted one, and did what he thought of them. And he got posters of them in his room. And what's astounding is he used to tell me he'd lay in bed and visualize me bringing him to school in it. And he collected these little exotic car models. And what's astounding is he had a model of the exact color and style of Lamborghini that I ended up getting, which I ultimately wrecked, by the way. But visualizing works. And so when I tell people, write your goals down, I do this, and then what's even more important than the goals is writing down why they're an absolute must. Taking the time to write down why you have to achieve them. And I mean with emotion, with strongly emotionally charged words, like, use words like incredible and magnificent, and because I'll live the life I always wanted, or I'll be able to do this for my spouse or my family. But don't stop there. Don't just write the positive whys. Take the time, and I know a lot of you listening are thinking, does this really work? And I promise you that it does. But take the time to write down the negative whys too. Write down things like, so I don't feel like a failure, so I don't feel like I let my family down. Because I will tell you, people will do more to avoid pain than to gain pleasure. I know it sounds harsh, but take the time to write down negative whys too. And I recommend pick 4 one-year goals and do this for those 4 one-year goals. But then after you write the whys, I take it to one more level, and that's with the pictures. I'm looking at my day timer here, which is an old word it's really called a Franklin Covey planner now. But in the back of this planner, I have pictures that I've had in here for 18 to 20 years. I've had the cars, the watches, the houses, all these things. And what's astounding is I have 3/4 of these things that I've wanted because I've triggered what's called the reticular activating system. And that's that thing, like the best way to describe it is when the first time you buy a car, you really didn't notice them that much, but then once you have it, you see them everywhere. That's the reticular activating system at work. And what it does is it filters out subconsciously what's important, what your brain thinks is important to you. By writing your goals, by writing your whys, and then I recommend getting pictures that move you emotionally and putting them in front of you, like I have them in my planner. If you look in my office or my home or in my exercise room, you'll see pictures of the things that I think are important to me now. That stuff works, guys. So I know some of you are like, oh, that's foofy and whatnot, but I promise you, it's worked for me and it's worked for a lot of other people, so I highly recommend it. That's kind of how I got through 2008. First of all, I realized that I knew that anything I put my focus to, I'd get through and I'd be able to maximize. And so I basically, out of the ashes of that, I built a litigation support company, a $10 million company with 60 employees out of that, because I focused on my ultimate goals. And I just highly recommend that for any of your listeners, maybe the ones that haven't taken action on real estate yet. Sit down, write down those goals, write down why they're a must, use emotional language, get pictures of them that juice you, go to your local drugstore and have them blown up and put them in front of you so you can't miss them. It works. And that's how I got through it, because I focused on my ultimate outcome. It was a huge setback. I mean, I went through a couple of months of feeling sorry for myself, but after that I picked myself up and I said, you know what? Life goes on. I have a roof over my head. I have an amazing woman in my life. And, you count your blessings. You focus on the positive, because where your focus goes, energy goes. And thoughts are things. And you really need to focus on, the things that you want, not the things that you don't want. So that's my story of overcoming, that $50 million seminar in 2008.
Such great stuff. Well, there's so many lessons in there. And I think when we go through any kind of adversity, keep it the main thing, right? What are you doing this for? I do think real estate investors get caught up in the value or even just the amount of cash flow. Don't think about the why. So that's incredible.
Let me give one other lesson here, because this is really important too, because back before I met Tony Robbins, I was pretty narcissistic. And what happened was the last example of wanting a big goal, I built this $8 million, 10,000 square foot testament to my ego on an island here in Florida. And I'd wanted this thing for 20 years. So I'm in the pool and I'm looking up at this house, and this magnificent house, and I was depressed. And I'm like, how could I possibly be depressed? I've accomplished the main thing I ever accomplished. And when I look back on it, I realized two things were happening. And I think it's really important to take 2 minutes and explain this. One of them was you never achieve a big goal without having other goals set up, because like the good book says, without a vision, the people perish. So you make sure that you have other goals lined up. So that was number one. But the other thing that I didn't realize was there's a big difference, and Tony Robbins talks about this, the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. Now, I had achieved in a big way, but I wasn't fulfilled. And fulfillment is different things to different people. But, back then I realized that I needed, not to focus on rod, but focus outwardly. And so I started feeding families, and I started a foundation. And since then, I've fed 50,000 children for the holidays. I've given thousands of backpacks filled with school supplies to local children that need it, and thousands of teddy bears to police departments for officers to put in their cars for when they encounter a child that's experienced something traumatic. And those of you listening, you don't have to do anything big like that. Even if you just make a decision to smile at everybody you see today and add value that way, or ask people how they're doing, or, do something that makes you feel fulfilled. It's not all about the money, guys. It's truly about being happy. And happiness doesn't come from the money. Happiness comes from being fulfilled. So I just wanted to throw that in there before we moved on to the real estate, if that's okay.
That's great stuff. Our guest today is Rod Khleif. He's a real estate investor, has a great book we'll talk about, and a podcast. More from Rod when we come back, plus we'll play real estate trivia next. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Live nationwide, you're listening to the Real Estate Guys. Find out more at realestateguysradio.com.
Are you ready to profit in paradise? Hi, it's Robert Helms, and if you think real estate investing means tenants, toilets, and termites, think again. Located just a short plane ride from the U.S., a virtually untouched paradise awaits, the beautiful country of Belize. When you go to Belize with the Real Estate Guys, you'll spend 4 fabulous days discovering one of the most intriguing real estate markets I've ever seen. With its jungle rainforests, pristine beaches, and 81-degree turquoise water, Belize is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Plus, it's considered one of the top 7 tax havens in the world. Belize property is on the rise, and many experts think the best is yet to come. But don't just take my word for it. Come experience Belize firsthand at our upcoming investor field trip. When you join us, you'll discover the many reasons we love Belize, like tremendously undervalued beachfront land, super low taxes, ease of doing business, and so much more. Get the details at realestateguysradio.com. Just click on events. See paradise for yourself. Click events at realestateguysradio.com, and I'll see you in beautiful Belize.
Hi, this is Simon Black from sovereignman.com, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. Be sure and tell a friend about the Real Estate Guys. Hey, if you haven't yet reserved your spot on the 15th Annual Investor Summit at Sea, you better do so quickly. Robert Kiyosaki's coming back with us live, plus Peter Schiff, Tom Hopkins, G. Edward Griffin, Mauricio Raoul. So many amazing folks are going to be on the summit. Don't miss the boat. Get all the details at realestateguysradio.com and click the button that says Summit. We're talking today about real estate cycles and, more importantly, preparing to thrive when the next downturn happens. Before we get back to our interview with Rod Khleif, it's time to play Real Estate Trivia, your chance to win a prize by knowing the answer to today's obscure real estate trivia question. As soon as you hear the question and think you know the answer, just send us your name, the answer, and your mailing address to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. The first person with the right answer is going to win an amazing prize. It's a brand new book out called Passionistas, Tips, Tales, and Tweetables from Women Pursuing Their Dreams. 40 different authors in this book with great, amazing, inspiring stories. You're going to love it. That can be yours if you know today's real estate trivia question. Before we give you this week's question, last week on the Real Estate Guys, we were with Ken McElroy. We asked this: which U.S. MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area, added the most new apartment units in 2016? Well, the answer is Houston, Texas. Number 2 was Dallas, followed by Manhattan and Los Angeles. Here's our real estate trivia question for this week. Which country in the world produces the most mustard? Yep, mustard is produced in lots of different places, but which country produces the most? And this is finished mustard, not necessarily growing of mustard seeds. Big distinction. Which country produces the most mustard? If you think you know, or you do know, or you just want to guess, either way, send us your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Include your name, the answer to the question, and your physical mailing address so that we can send the winner a copy of Passionistas, Tips, Tales, and Tweetables from Women Pursuing Their Dreams. That's today's real estate trivia question. Our guest is Rod Khleif, and he's got a great book we're going to give you a chance to get a copy of before we're done, and it really is about multifamily investing. In fact, the book's called How to Create Lifetime Cash Flow Through Multifamily Properties. And Rod, you were telling us, how you were a single-family guy who was also acquiring an occasional apartment building, and when the whole thing blew up, you had this realization about apartment investing. Speak to why multifamily works for you.
Well, I'll tell you, I had 800 houses in Florida, and I had 500 in Denver, like I said at one time. But logistically, for a whole lot of reasons, okay? It makes my head hurt to think about what I went through to do that. It made me a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but to have properties spread out, houses spread out over a big area like that, first of all, to show them is a challenge, versus, if you have 20 houses and they're spread out throughout town, showing them is a hassle, versus having 20 in one location. If you want to do maintenance work, if you have different houses, they are all going to have different mechanical systems, different appliances, and different roofing materials. Everything's different. So you can't stockpile parts. So if you want to fix a maintenance item, you have to send somebody to the house, number one, which could be, in my case, it was 2 hours one direction or 2 hours the other direction and everywhere in between. So that's challenging. Then they have to see what's wrong, go to the local hardware store, Home Depot, whatever, Lowe's, and then bring it back and fix it. So logistically very ineffective versus 20 units in an apartment complex. You can stockpile the parts. Maintenance is much cheaper. Showing the property is much easier. And if you own a house and you're vacant, you're 100% vacant. if you own even just a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex, if one unit's empty, usually you're okay, or you're not it's not as painful at the very least.
Right.
And for those of you that haven't bought anything yet, if you're young and you don't have a spouse that's going to give you a hard time about this, instead of buying a house, go buy a 2 to 4 unit. Those are considered residential. Anything 2 to 4 units is residential multifamily. Anything 5 plus is commercial. So go buy a fourplex and live in one of the units. I interviewed one guy on my show that literally did that, started 10 years ago. He now has over 100 units, multi-million-dollar portfolio. He did it by himself, nobody else's money, just bought them one after another. And you can build your way to massive success with small multifamily properties. So for those of you just starting out, and what's great about residential multifamily is it's residential financing, 30-year financing, fixed, low down. I mean, it's just a fantastic way for someone that's young that wants to get started in real estate to get started. So that's number one. Now, in my situation, because, I was spread out, I wasn't effective, I wasn't focused on cash flow, it just imploded. It just didn't make sense once I was upside down to continue to try to feed it. And, I really thought, like everybody did, countries went bankrupt over 2008, so I can't feel too bad. But I thought that, the gravy train was going to go on forever. And now I know better. And I actually, if I'd have been really present back then, I would have known better too, because I'd gone through 2 other cycles prior to that. But, when everything's golden, you kind of lose sight of that.
Well, absolutely. And, the thing is, you've got to figure it out as you go, but you also can learn. I love the seminar metaphor. We learn so much from the things we go through if we choose to take the lesson. I think you're a great example of getting the lesson. We often talk about when you make a mistake, when something goes wrong, when you lose money on a property, that you've paid full price for that lesson. You might as well get the lesson, but so many folks don't. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. We have to face our failures up front, right? Because that's how we learn.
Well, no question. And I can't tell you that every time I've learned, because I have made the same mistake more than once on occasion. But, if you think of your setbacks as seminars, it makes them a lot more palatable. And the only time you're not going to have setbacks is, frankly, when you're 6 feet underground. It's just part of life. And so, just knowing that you're going to have problems come up makes it okay when they happen, and it's just not a surprise. And the more successful you become, the more quality your problems become. But you're never going to not have problems. And so that's why, mindset is so important. And, I love talking about the psychology of success because it's just so important. It's 80% of it.
Well, it is 80% of it. And yet, I would say that most real estate students spend 80% of their time studying things like HVAC and due diligence and market analysis and school district zones and all of that, all of which is important. But if you can't keep your head in the game, you're not going to get there.
Right. No, and that's exactly right. And you have to have that mindset to be able to take action, to be able to, maybe try a larger deal, to build your risk muscle, because it's a muscle. And so, I on my podcast, and thank you for mentioning it, I do a little 5-minute clip every week about the psychology of success. And I talk about, goal setting, dealing with fear, confidence, and all those things, because it's just so important. And I know you guys touch on it a lot in your show, and it's just so important.
Absolutely. And, the other great thing about, the podcast world is that it's a great way for people to be able to learn, get new ideas when they're doing other things, when they're driving, when they're exercising, whatever it is. Audio doesn't demand your full attention like video does. And video is a great medium, and it's important, but there are times when we just need to have that fertile soil of our mind absorbing good ideas. So we love that about what you do and the guests that you bring. Your podcast is called Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing, and the book is Lifetime Cash Flow Through Multifamily Properties. Tell us about the book and what you wanted to say to the world when you came out with that book, Rod.
Well, the subtitle is The New Rules of Real Estate Investing, and for me, the new rules are forget value, focus on cash flow. Because, let's be candid, there's another contraction coming. We're near a top, and who knows how quick it'll happen with the new presidency, but it's going to happen. Real estate goes up and down, and that's not a bad thing, because with crisis or with a downturn comes incredible opportunity every time. So, but knowing that it's going to happen, you move prudently. Like I tell my coaching clients, I don't recommend 5-year debt right now. Like we started talking about residential multifamily properties. When you go into commercial 5+ units, typically you're going to get a 20 or 30-year amortization. Your payments are going to be out over that period of time, but you're going to have a balloon. You're going to have a 5, 7, or 10-year balloon. And so I tell people, because a contraction is likely. It's going to happen. It happens every time. You don't want to be at the bottom of a cycle when your balloon comes due, because you may have a property that's cash flowing great, but if the values have gone down and you can't refinance based on the value, that's a horrible place to be. So the book, and there's no fluff in it, guys. It's 200 pages long. It's total content. It's really more like a textbook, okay, from how to find an area to how to evaluate an area to how to talk to brokers and develop those relationships, talking to sellers, asking for seller financing, how to do that, how to structure a deal, how to finance a deal, how to close a deal, and how to manage a deal, everything. I mean, it's soup to nuts. It's I've had incredible feedback on it, and I'll give it to your listeners for free. So we'll make sure to make that available for your listeners, and that's my gift.
That's awesome. In fact, if you want a free copy of Rod's book, all you have to do is send an email to rod@realestateguysradio.com, and you get a link to be able to download the book, read it, learn some great stuff. Hey, you've been through highs, you've been through lows, kind of in closing, Rod. If you're talking to that person out there who is either new to investing or they've hit one of those brick walls, what would you say to them as far as your advice, being a guy who's been through the ups and downs?
Absolutely. And there'll be a little redundancy here, because if you're there, make sure you know exactly what you want. With clarity, write your goals. Make sure they're measurable. And then do what I said. Write your whys. Know why it is you want those things. And then get pictures of them. And then just take action. Because I promise you'll be glad you did. And if you don't have to go out and buy a 100-unit apartment complex. Go buy a duplex. Go buy a triplex. Or even a house. If you've never bought anything, go buy a house. I mean, I'm going to try to push you to buy, multifamily, but just do it. Just take action. Learn what you need to learn. Read my book. It'll help a lot. But just take action, because you'll be glad you did. And the clock is ticking. And the sooner you get started, the better. And if you focus on cash flow, you don't have to worry about a contraction, because you'll be okay. People will still need a place to live, especially if you focus on affordable housing of some sort, B, C properties, or even D if you're not afraid to manage tough properties. But that's my advice to you. Take action.
That's awesome stuff. Well, hey, Rod, sure appreciate your passion and you're sharing your great ideas, and good continued luck with your podcast. And thanks for being on the program today.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
There's Rod Khleif. Again, if you'd like a copy of Rod's book, which you're going to want to get and read, even if you've not thought about multifamily, this is a great way to get introduced to it. How to create lifetime cash flow through multifamily properties. All you do is send an email to rod@realestateguysradio.com. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. More when we come back. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Real estate investment advice right in your mailbox. Sign up for the free Real Estate Guys newsletter at realestateguysradio.com.
Hi, this is Patrick Donahoe, CEO of Paradigm Life. Wall Street and banks spend billions of dollars per year in advertising with the goal to convince you that they are the solution. But take a look around. None of their advice has worked. If you're listening to this, odds are pretty good that you're already a real estate investor, or at least becoming one. So why do you do it? Is it to hedge inflation, the tax benefits, or maybe it's to get your money away from Wall Street? It's because of these benefits and so many more that I created the Real Estate Investor's Guide to the Perpetual Wealth Strategy. When you combine successful real estate investing with the perpetual wealth strategy, you have the recipe for what has helped the wealthy to establish their financial well-being for decades. You can download the Real Estate Investor's Guide to the Perpetual Wealth Strategy today by clicking the Resources tab on the Real Estate Guys Radio homepage. Don't wait. Go download it now.
Memphis is famous for being the home of the king of rock and roll, but it's also the king of cash flow. If you're looking for affordable cash flow properties, it's hard to beat Memphis. Get your portfolio rocking and more cash flowing your way by calling Terry Kerr at Mid-South Home Buyers. Terry's the king of turnkey properties. Contact Terry through the resource section at realestateguysradio.com. And be sure to order Terry's tips for turnkey rental property investing report. It's free. Just send your request to turnkey@realestateguysradio.com.
Hi, this is Steve Forbes. You're listening to The Real Estate Guys. Have fun. You'll learn something.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Hey, if you want to earn big money doing big deals, come on out to the Secrets of Successful Syndication, March 3rd and 4th in Dallas, Texas. It's going to be an amazing event. If you're stuck with deploying your own capital and your own ability to get loans, this is the way that you can go raise money from other folks. And we have an amazing group of folks. The faculty's great. The people signing up. It's going to be a nice full room. And it's exactly where we met Rod Khleif. What an inspiring guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, great energy, super articulate. Obviously, he's a very competent guy, very accomplished. And there's a balance between knowing that you're good or knowing that you've done well, and then also recognizing that you've made mistakes and got the lessons, and you can just talk about it openly. And I think one of the things that I appreciate about Rod's demeanor, and I try to be this way myself, is I try to be objective with myself. I try to acknowledge my strengths and I try to acknowledge my weaknesses, and I try to own the stuff that's my problems and the things that I can fix, and I try not to worry about the things that I can't control. And really that comes down to this idea of how do you thrive through a downturn, or how do you prepare to bounce back? And it really comes to managing your thoughts. It really comes down to that, because out of your thoughts and your belief system will come all of the actions that you take or don't take. And then out of that will come the results you produce. And we say this all the time on this show, and it's so true. And then you hear somebody that actually went through it and they're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, preach it, brother. I mean, it's just awesome stuff.
Well, I mean, having just done our 2.5-day goals retreat, and he's talking about goals and visualization, I'm like, man, this is crazy. But the reality is you've got to maintain and control your psychology. When things are bad, as Pressfield likes to tell us, Stephen Pressfield, when things go bad, that's not you. That's just something that happened. And when things go great, well, that's also not you. You can't be so attached to the outcome that you forget the path you're on. Success is not a destination. It's a journey.
I'll tell you, it's gross, but I'll tell you the way I remember that analogy. If you're walking through life and you step in something that somebody else, like an animal, left, it gets on you and it smells horrible. And it's gross and it's disgusting and nauseating, but it isn't you. It's just something you stepped in.
Yeah.
And you can wash it off and then you can move on. If somebody puts a bunch of perfume or cologne on you and you smell wonderful and you look good, a storm can wash all that away.
Or stepping in something.
Or stepping in something can overwhelm the nice aroma, with the bad aroma. But it's just that understanding that neither of these things is you. You are just going through life in a series of events, and sometimes you're going to step in stuff, sometimes you're going to smell like a rose. Either case, just keep moving forward. And I think that was the lesson that Rod was delivering. It's certainly been a lesson I can relate to in my own life. It's never as good as it seems. It's never as bad as it seems. Just keep working, keep doing the right things, keep trying to improve. And I think the last thing that I'd like to comment as far as this goes is this concept of personal development. The idea that you need to work on yourself as much or more as you work on your portfolio. You need to manage your thoughts as much or more as you do your cash flows and expenses. So when you understand that and you accept that, and I heard Rod pleading with you, please understand this stuff. It sounds hocus pocus, but it works. He's qualified to have an opinion.
Right.
Because, it's one thing when a guy who's had nothing but success comes out and goes, hey, everybody, this is how you do it. Like, well, come back to me after you've been wiped out.
Yeah.
Because where you really learn is when you get wiped out and rebuild. I know I am 10 times smarter than I was when I thought I was 10 times smarter.
Right.
And part of that being 10 times smarter is being 10 times more humble, is realizing that I need a lot of help. I need to go ask people for ideas and information. I need to try to be the smallest guy in the room, not the biggest guy in the room. And Rod is like a breath of fresh air, because a lot of people out there just want to talk about sunshine and unicorns. They don't want to acknowledge the bad stuff. But the bad stuff is where all of the lessons are.
He also knows a ton about multifamily investing. So again, if you want a free copy of Rod's book, How to Create Lifetime Cash Flow Through Multifamily Properties, all you have to do is send an email to Rod at realestateguysradio.com, and we'll make sure that you get a copy of his book. Next week on The Real Estate Guys, we have an amazing show for you, and coming up soon, it's Ask the Guys. If you have a question for The Real Estate Guys, here's what you do. Go to our website at realestateguysradio.com and click Ask the Guys. Tell us your question, and in a few weeks, we'll be answering many of those from our listeners. Until then, go out and make some equity happen.
Hello, this is Robert Kiyosaki, and I'm very excited that I'll be joining the Real Estate Guys for their Investor Real Estate Summit at Sea. Join me, join my friends, join the Real Estate Guys Investor Summit at Sea, and I'll see you out there. Thank you very much.
This episode of the Real Estate Guys radio show is brought to you by Paradigm Life. Powerful cash management strategies using life insurance. Learn more at beyourbank.com. Mid-South Home Buyers. Low-cost, turnkey cash flow properties in Memphis, Tennessee. Corporate Direct. Asset protection strategies for real estate investors. From attorney and rich dad advisor Garrett Sutton.
Find these and other great companies under the Resources tab at realestateguysradio.com. To learn how you can expose your product or service to the Real Estate Guys audience, call 888-489-7723 extension 4. That's 888-489-7723 extension 4. Or use the feedback page at realestateguysradio.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week right here on the Real Estate Guys Radio Show.